Hello, everybody, and welcome to V.A.C. Roundtable. Oh, we're up to 81 now, and it's the season. It's fall, and being that it is fall, we want to basically see what is possible for planting your soil. Right? Soil preparation is something that is very much required, and something that is not everybody has an understanding of. So we want to bring in an expert, and this gentleman has been doing it for a long time. And he is a legal grower here in California, and that is Mr. Mark Greyshock of Greenshock Farms. And in the past, we've tried to have various discussions, but we haven't been able to arrive here. And fall is the time when you can start prepping your soil for next year. So we're gonna get into it pretty, we're digging in deep. We're gonna be earthworms here for a bit, but the reality is yeah, we're trying to help you understand what you need to put into your soil so that you can get the best possible expectation out of your plant. And there's different ways of growing, and we're going to be concentrating on soil grown today and in outdoor growing. So, first off, welcome, Mr. Greyshock, for joining us tonight and educating our veterans on the subject. And we're just going to jump right into it. And this is a question that comes up for every one of our guests, and it's a multi-tier question. So, how did you originally come to cannabis? When did you originally hear about it? Okay. But then when did you get turned on? And then when did you decide it was going to be your life's work?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor here to be with you guys. Cannabis, looking back on it, growing up, I grew up in Orange County in Capistrano Beach, a little coastal city there. And being at a very young age, I can remember just always smelling cannabis smoke in the air. And, you kind of realize something's going on with the adults hiding something from you, but that smell's very obvious. So I was always curious of that since a little kid. And then I listened to a lot of the propaganda that was out there as I grew up. And, I didn't partake in cannabis until I was out of high school. And I thought it was a bad thing. I was believing all the propaganda I was hearing and everything. And once I got out of high school, I was in the commercial fishing business when I got out of high school. And there were people that were smoking cannabis here and there. And finally, one of the days I tried it, and immediately I couldn't believe what it really was compared to what I thought it was going to be. It was a really beautiful experience. And I'm someone that really loves nature, and I loved nature before I was in cannabis. I would spend my summertime in Northern California up in Siskiyou County outside of Wairika and Hornbrook at my great grandfather's cattle ranch, where I would go fishing and hunting and exploring and picnicking. And so nature was kind of in my blood. And my mom, at a very early age, just encouraged me. She would take me out. I grew up there in Orange County, but I would go out to Casper's Wilderness Park there and get to go. One of the things I started doing at a young age was catching lizards. I just thought lizards were really cool little creatures and stuff. And then just started loving all nature, wildlife. And then finally I was introduced to cannabis there, and that's when it all clicked. When you're in nature and you've smoked, just the bird sounds, the little wind blowing through the trees, all that stuff is really absorbed. And so it clicked with me. And now I was really curious at that point in time because cannabis, especially back at that time, was extremely expensive. Um, and it was hard to secure good cannabis. A lot of it was just really crummy cannabis, and it wasn't giving me that experience that that first homegrown type style stuff did for me. So I started, buying the books, getting Ed Rosenthal's books and Jorge Cervantes, and just reading up on it and trying to learn. And then I put it into practice where, I went out in those mountains, and I know it's something that is looked down on pretty bad, going out and growing cannabis out in the mountains. And I was very conscious of the environment and everything, and I did my best job to not harm things. But I went out there and started to try to grow cannabis, and it's not an easy thing out in those environments like that when you're first getting started with no real practical uh, having done it. So I actually ended up packing on one of the full moon nights all kinds of bags of soil way out into the mountain there, where I ended up putting them in pots. And, those black little pots heat up real bad and this and that. And it was hard to keep them watered well. And so my plants didn't do well at all. My expectations were just really, I was hoping for a good year and it was a terrible year. Barely had enough to smoke. And through just networking, I ended up meeting somebody, and his name was Chris. And Chris had a lot of experience with growing cannabis. He'd actually just gotten out of jail um, for a 6 month period for growing cannabis. So I took him out to my spots and showed him what they looked like. And, the first thing he pointed out, which was kind of funny, was he asked me, he said, "Did you hike all this soil out here?" And obviously, yeah, that's what I did. And I told him, yeah, I spent a few nights on full moons bringing this all out here. And he pointed out, he said, "Look at all the earth. Look at everything growing out of it. Look at all these plants. It's great dirt you have out here. You don't need to pack that stuff out here." And so that was my beginning of all of a sudden a little light bulb going off and realizing that this soil might be able to be utilized that was just out in the mountains. So I started amending it with some different things and found out that, yeah, that's the way to go out. Cannabis loves these mountain soils through California. And now just kind of looking back on everything, that was 30 years ago in the mid 90s, 1994, when I was first out there starting to try to do that stuff. About 1996, 1997, started figuring it out a little bit better and had opportunities to grow in more areas, which I loved seeing how cannabis comes out different in different areas and different terroir type style things and different soil and earth and all that kind of stuff. So I now have had the pleasure in growing from San Diego, Riverside, Orange County, Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo County, Sonoma County, Mendocino County, Humboldt, and over here in Nevada and Calaveras counties as well. And I've been able to utilize the same pretty much principles that I started with being able to grow cannabis in all these different environments and all the different types of soils, whether it was really rocky type of earth or whether it was really heavy packed clay type of stuff. And I wasn't ever really getting soil tests and all that kind of stuff. I was just doing what worked at the beginning. I was improving it along the way, but it's a really basic kind of method. The soil in these mountains is already really good, where you can see the trees are huge trees here in California, some of the biggest in the earth. So they're growing right out of this ground without even being amended. Um, but yeah, I'll go ahead and stop there.
Well, thank you for that introduction to you and your growing style. So next up will be Councilmember Michael Davis. Councilmember Davis.
Yeah, hey Mark, thanks for joining us. My question is, what are your fundamental principles for creating and maintaining that healthy soil that keeps supporting that consistent high quality cannabis crops. And kind of just to add a little bit to that, you just mentioned and I'll probably mess up the word, the terroir. It's kind of like saying rural, right? Some people can say that word, and uh, so that type of thing, right? I know what it means, right? Like, so kind of if you could maybe terroir, yeah, I'll still mess it up, but kind of Wade and I were kind of just talking about this too. Like, for instance, if maybe you were to, plant, one plant that's the same genetic, say maybe, in this region of Northern California, in this particular soil, what would it, how would it change compared to say a soil in like maybe Ohio or something? If you could maybe just elaborate on that.
Yeah. I kind of feel it's more of even the environment itself when it comes to things like humidity and different stuff like that, that kind of has a bigger influence sometimes than the soil does. Um, the soil, our basic principle when it comes to amending like some soil, let's just say you're going to get started right now. You go out in your yard, you got some nice dirt, but you're just like, what do I do with it now to get it started? The way we start our farms is the first year, we'll just put on top of the ground, right on top of the earth, a nice couple inches of some good organic compost, which is basically just straw, some manure, some wood chips that's been kind of given some time to kind of get all the good stuff happening in it. So lay that on the ground right there. And then I'll put a layer of alfalfa. And alfalfa is something that I just started using about 7, 8 years ago. And it's just something that has a really good nutritional value content to start with. It has a good ability to break up the soil, keep like a clay soil or a rock soil or whatever with some good organic material in it, breaking down. Feeds like the earthworms and all that stuff really good. I notice worms love alfalfa. One thing when I mention an alfalfa, I'm pretty conscious of the different areas that alfalfa come from. When you're putting something like cannabis in your body, one thing you really, or at least I'm very conscious of, is making sure it's a very organic, clean source of cannabis. That's why some people may want to grow their own cannabis, is just to ensure that fact of the inputs that are going into this, because there's some really poor practices that can happen for different kinds of pesticides that could be used and stuff. And yeah, it'll grow you a great plant, but you're kind of harming your body, I think, as you put some of that stuff back into your body. So we keep everything really organic. And when it comes to alfalfa, there's a lot of areas that you wouldn't want to use alfalfa from, I don't think, because it's a heavy pesticide driven area somewhere maybe in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley here, where we get our alfalfa from. We make sure it's a really nice mountain grown organic source. So like us up here in Grass Valley, Nevada City area, just to the east of us is Sierra Valley. And up there at 5,000 feet, they grow some amazing alfalfa. It's the most lush green blue alfalfa. And just to get a little technical on alfalfa, that's where we like our alfalfa to come from. It's a little more expensive, but we feel it's worth it. And then, that's basically a compost and alfalfa. If you want to get a little more technical and spend a little more money, the plant will respond a little better with some kind of high-end nutrients sometimes. One of my favorites is just the Peruvian seabird guano pellets that have been used down in Peru for thousands of years. I think there's even been wars fought over that fertilizer in the past. But it's just guano that they collect from out on the rocks, that the seabirds, fish are a really good source of a lot of good nutrients, and the birds are eating the fish and then just pooping the fish out. And then so you have all kinds of good stuff. It's a 12-12-2 product, which is a really high kind of nitrogen, high phosphorus, but I've never had problems with it burning my plants or anything. And that's one of the things I also use through the season a little bit, to just basically throw on top of the ground to feed the soil a little bit, get a little more nitrogen in there, a little more phosphorus for the plant to really thrive with, is those Peruvian seabird guano pellets. But it's a very, that first year we'll dig that stuff into the ground to break up the ground and loosen it. For a big project, we'll use an excavator or a backhoe. For a small home project, for somebody just growing a couple plants, 6 plants or something, then it's easy enough to just use a shovel and get some exercise from it, and break it into the ground and turn it over and mix it in. Now that first year, that's kind of important to break up the ground. It just speeds the process up. At that point, though, now you're working with a living soil bed, whether it be just one little mound or a nice little sized trench. Um, Now you're using cover crops and things like that through the off seasons. Like at this time of the year right now, we have the cover crops in the ground. And what that does is, the main purpose we use the cover crops is to keep that ground nice and broken up with all that root penetration that happens from the cover crop, Plus, it kind of keeps the sun off the soil. You know, the leaves of that stuff will cut. That goes and lays on the ground. The worms will come up and eat that. All kinds of stuff that you can't even see for little microorganisms are eating that kind of stuff and using it for cover. And it's really a fun process when you get kind of technical into it because there's so much going on right there that you're not really seeing, but there's so much life in it. And that's some of the reasons to use the organic inputs and products and not use like Miracle Grow fertilizers, salts and stuff, because you change the dynamic of the earth when you start using that stuff. You're not going from a natural process of everything naturally feeding your plant, and now you're chemically feeding it with salts and stuff, so it ends up killing a lot of your micro life that's in the ground there. So we do a good job at staying away from that kind of product.
Council member Laughter has a follow-up on that.
Yeah, I love what you've shared with us so far, Mark, and as someone said earlier, thanks for joining us. I I can't help but call out grow your own alfalfa as well. It takes a little longer, but alfalfa seed is fairly inexpensive, and as part of breaking up the ground, you can work it into the soil at this time of year. And one of the huge for me benefits of alfalfa is it's a nitrogen fixer. And the soil on our farm is actually deficient in nitrogen, or was back when we bought the place, and had gross surplus of potassium and phosphorus. And I realized that because everything I planted would only grow a little bit and then it would flower. And yeah, so I did a soil test and realized that I was deficient in nitrogen. And I love that. I love the whole process you're describing. Thank you, Mark. That's all I had. It's more of a comment than a question.
Oh, thank you, Wade. I'm honored to hear you say that. I don't come from a learning background through school. Everything I'm kind of sharing has been through just trial and error and having done it.
And that speaks volumes, because we understand, and as I've worked in and around cannabis farms and farmers over the past 30 years, for every grower you meet, there's a different way of growing. They're all trying to arrive at the same place, and people who are watching, you're watching, saying, "Oh, well, this is how I do it." All these things are moldable, but what he is giving you are the basics specifically for living soil organic preparation. So it's stepping away from what I was traditionally taught, which is using salt-based solutions, and actually creating living, breaking down soil so that uh, the tests have shown that as opposed to using salt-based solutions, using organic and especially outdoor sun-grown as tends to give cannabis unique terpene profiles, and they're even finding extinct terpene profiles reemerging due to organic and living soil. So we just want to let you who are watching aware of why we're going in this direction, is because this is where we want to see in the future. We would love to see large scale production of that, but we know that small scale farmers who are fixating on craft cannabis, good cannabis, can be done in the small scale, but it can also be done in the large scale, depending. But we'll get into that later. Next up will be Council Member Leslie Fries with her next question.
Thanks, Etienne. Mark, I have first say thank you for growing the way that you grow. I personally think there's no other way to grow than regenerative and organic. So thank you. My question, you kind of already covered, I think. It was, can you share any specific soil amendments or natural techniques you found essential for your craft cannabis? Since you've kind of already covered that, I'm curious, since I'm a hemp farmer and grew for cannabinoid production and on large scale, how would you translate that into larger acreage, let's say, 50 acres plus?
Yeah, that's a really large, that's getting large, but just expanding on what's done on the small end of things. Like our farms are not large, real large farms. We're just 10,000 square foot farms. Takes us a couple days to kind of spread out the alfalfa and then the compost on top of it, and then maybe a day to dig it in if we were setting up a new farm. But once it's set up, it's really nice because it's just set up. You don't have to do anything once you begin to break, that earth down and allow nature to just do what nature does. There's a few different ways of going about it. Like Etienne was explaining, I'm given a very basic breakdown of how to do this type of thing, just to share with some of your viewers here as a very easy technique and an easy way to get started. You can go out and buy a smart pot and this and that, but technically you don't have to really even do that. Like the other day I was just planting potatoes is what I was actually planting, and just knowing, they need room to breathe and grow and stuff. And one of my techniques that I'll do is not even break up the ground, but just allow things to start on a real easy scale. Let's say the other day, what I did is I just dropped buckets of earth. It was good soil. It was actually potting soil at this point, but I just dumped that right on top of the native earth that was in my nursery area. And then I packed a bale of alfalfa. I took it all apart and just kind of packed like 4 inches, 6 inches of alfalfa all around that soil to just kind of hold it in place. But now you have like a living soil bed that's starting to be created above ground. And it's just interesting, like watching the way that happens over the next year and 2 years. Like watching all that humus kind of start to go down towards where you have your native soil layer right there on the ground, and you start to see the worms come into it, and even gophers. Like gophers are a funny thing, some areas gophers can be a real problem, and we'll put chicken wire in the ground. But in some areas, for some reason, gophers just don't even bother the plants. They'll go all through everything, but they're not really after killing the plants. It seems like down here in our Nevada County farm, I stopped using chicken wire because it seemed to not have a purpose to it. Yeah, there were gophers and stuff going through everything, but they weren't hurting the plants. And it seemed to me they were almost just doing a good job at keeping soil turned up and kind of getting into clay areas and working them. And I started to almost appreciate the gophers. But it's interesting to watch the way that like this native soil that we have, once you start to add organic matter and compost, how it becomes living like so fast. Everything, like you have all these organisms that are living there. Now you're feeding them. They're all coming to it. They're all working the soil in their own little different ways. And then when you grow plants in it, that's just really a magical thing. It's like it's really nature doing some amazing things right there in front of your eyes. It's a fun thing to be a part of.
And that's what a
Thank you.
lot of our veterans have found is that, there's therapy in growing, and there is a thing called grow therapy, and working directly with the soil in helping something come to life, especially those that are sick. We have found in the medical cannabis community a very compassionate understanding, because while bringing something to life while going through a very traumatic situation has been very helpful for people. And so we've always been huge fans of, hobby farming on up. So, again, thank you for taking the time with us today. Next up will be Council Member Laughter with our next question.
Yeah, thank you, Etienne. And again, Mark, thank you for joining us. I want to do a quick little detour because honestly, I felt like the introduction that you received wasn't up to what I thought should have been said. So pardon me, Etienne. I'm going to add to what you said in introducing this young man. We all know that the cannabis plant is a weed. It grows pretty easy. Most any place you give it soil, water, and sun, you're going to get a plant. Eventually, if things go well, you'll get flowers. And meantime, some combination of practices, standards, attitude, way of working with the plant has resulted in Mark over the last, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, over the last 5 years, have you not again and again won best of in blind tasting competitions at the California State Fair and at the Emerald Cup and likely in other locations? Which tells me you're you're somebody we can all learn something from because you're doing something and you're doing it at scale. That's the other thing. You keep referencing farms, plural. You have multiple farms, all producing high quality cannabis. That's the introduction I think you need, Mark, because I think people need to understand these things that you're talking about not only work, not only save you costs, but if done with diligence, actually produce highly, uh, yeah, there's no question about quality, diversity of cannabinoids and terpenes in your plants. I've had a chance to uh, sample a few of your flowers. Um, so I'll stop there because I have definitely gone off the tracks. I just got to say, it's really a pleasure to hear the things you're doing and how you're confirming some of the practices that we all think are a good place to be. So the question now, I'll do what we're supposed to do. So let's see, old eyes. How do you incorporate sustainability and environmental stewardship into your soil preparation process? And again, I got to add at the end, you do it at scale, Mark. This is a really beautiful thing, man. I'll shut up now. Your turn.
That's an honor to hear somebody like yourself, Wade, say that to me. I mean, that makes me feel really blessed and really good because I work really hard. I spend a lot of time in the field. You know, a lot of times you don't even realize the things that are going on in your life, like some of the things you said with the awards and different things. And those are things that just come by way of trying really hard and loving and having a real passion for what I do. And I put all my time and energy that I have into something like that. And I've learned a lot of the principles and skills through the years to be able to apply towards all this stuff. But when it comes, like, that's one of the things that I feel like I think like I was saying, outdoor cannabis growing in particular is more of a form of an art, especially when you're at a level of real award-winning cannabis. And California, with the ability of what California can do with our climates and everything, and being in proximity to the ocean like this, and these beautiful forests, like plants love growing with plants. They love each other. They know each other are there. They can feel each other. Like they transpire oxygen and moisture and stuff out of them. They know where each other are at, and they love each other. And so, like, when you grow cannabis, it's kind of funny. Like in California, I'm just kind of speaking of things that I'm thinking of right now. But in California, like, the valley area where it's a little hotter and drier, and you don't have trees, and you just have like kind of like a grassland. When you get technical, it's really difficult to grow something in that environment that's going to come at a level that would compete at the Emerald Cup. It's like the reason Humboldt and Mendocino and Trinity and over here in Nevada County grow such amazing cannabis is the environment and the things going on around it with all the plants that are growing around it. Like during these summer months, or during the summer months that we had and coming into fall, you have those plants transpiring moisture out of them that keeps the humidity up at about 30-40% during a typical day in those types of forest areas. They recover a little more humidity at night, but it's because the plants are transpiring moisture out of them and stuff. And the way the sun bounces through those moisture prisms and crystals in the air and stuff, it's like all magic that happens in those things. So like, you can grow great cannabis in a lot of places, but to grow really magical cannabis, I feel like it's kind of critical to be in some of these forests and beautiful, beautiful areas that are untainted by, dust and pesticides. It's really been something in California here to see as this all transitioned into the legal market, and seeing this pesticide taint and drift that happens in certain areas. Like you can't even grow in California's Central Valley and practically pass tests just because the dust itself has particulate matter in it that ends up affecting your plants with a little tiny, they're testing these things for parts per million, parts per billion on stuff. And so just a little bit of it taints your plant kind of. And so when you're up in these really pretty, pristine climates, that's where you can grow some really amazing cannabis. And I have the pleasure and the just fortunate thing in life of knowing these areas and having friends and properties in these areas where I've been able to learn how to grow that type of cannabis. But yeah, thank you very much for mentioning that. We are one of the top awarded Emerald Cup farms. I think I have a really neat record going right now for 9 years in a row, being able to place in the top 20 category. And just looking back, it's been a heck of a challenge to be able to do that. But it's out of love and just wanting to show people and share a really nice cannabis like that too. And just, if nobody's doing it, nobody knows. And so we're trying to do it up here. I know some of my friends up in these mountains do the same thing. They grow absolutely incredible cannabis, a lot different than what your commercial market is producing right now. And so that was today what I was going to do a roundtable earlier, and that was over in Santa Rosa that got canceled. And that was to just speak a little bit about small farms up in the Emerald Triangle in that area and what makes these things special and produce different types of medicine than your commercial farms are really growing. I mean, even down to the point right now, some of the things that have driven me nuts watching this commercial marketplace take hold. And this is one of the reasons why I encourage everybody as best as they can to grow their own medicine, learn, begin this. Like you were talking about, it's therapeutic to get outside and get some exercise and spend time out there with birds chirping and around your plant that you're going to use as medicine. I mean, it's a magical thing being able to turn a little seed or a little clone. It's like Jack and the Beanstalk story into this big beautiful plant that is now yours, and you made it happen and gave it the inputs. You know what it is. It's a real magical connection to be able to grow your own medicine like that. So I really encourage people to do that for themselves. Yeah, thank you.
And give some perspective, people. I've been an Emerald Cup judge and I'm an ambassador to the state fair. On average, sometimes it's 400 to 800 cannabis submittals for the Emerald Cup. So when he says he's placed the last 9 years in the top 25, that is no small undertaking when you consider the hundreds of samples I have seen. I usually do the cartridges, so unfortunately I don't do the flower. But specifically, that is a very challenging, and I have pictures going back. It's because I've been judging for the past 9 years of the old stacks of just all the different cannabis that are representative there, and to pierce that one is amazing in itself, but to do it consistently 9 years in a row, that's a different level. And so realize this is the type of gentleman we're talking with today. So this is award winning, many years, many different levels, many different judges, and representing. So, with that, we're going to go to our next representative, Michael Krawitz. You're recognized.
Thank you, Ed. Welcome. It's really been great to hear from you and really inspiring. I you've kind of reminded me of a little story, so I want to share a quick story with you. But it's hard to remember now. Canada is so progressive with their policies and stuff. It wasn't that many years ago where it was heavily illegal to cultivate cannabis, and it was back to the old world, right, of illegal markets and what we now call the traditional cannabis markets, right? And the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, had put a little article in the newspaper up there uh, that they were trying to get in the heads of the criminals, right? They were trying to get in the heads of cannabis growers. So to do that, they were going to grow a room of cannabis, and they did it. And then, like months later, there was this a while later, there was this smaller article where the RCMP was complaining that they were having all kinds of trouble with the plants. They just weren't growing. They were looking for help and any advice that could be given on what they might be doing wrong. And somebody wrote in and just said, man, you got to love the plants more, man. And that was printed right in the paper, just like that. And I just, what you were saying just made me think of that. And it's so true and quite naive and simple, but yet bold and brazen and beautiful. So anyway, my question is a simple one. I want to reword it slightly. I know and we know vets all over the country, all over the world, and in most places they don't have access to cannabis of the quality that you're producing. They may not have even ever tried cannabis of the quality that you're producing. So from that perspective, and given that, if you could just sort of walk through what it's like, just sort of really describe the cannabis product and what it smells like, what it looks like, what it tastes like, what its effects are like, if you can just from that place of love to just give people a feel for what it is that you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It comes from one of the reasons I'm able to select and breed and kind of choose the cannabis that I'm able to do is from experience and having been able to see a tremendous amount of genetics through my lifetime grown out. And I've seen so many different traits of cannabis and so many different types of, different profiles of different types of terpenes and different types of cannabinoid ratios that I'm just very familiar. As I smoke things, I can really feel things well. And smelling things, I've smelt so much cannabis through my life that I recognize when sometimes something's special that pops out. If I didn't have all the experience with all the different genetics that I've had, I probably wouldn't be able to select like I can. I used to spend a lot of time going over to Amsterdam and up there to Canada and getting genetics as well as everything I could collect here in California and growing as much stuff out as I could in order to select and start choosing things that I like. Sometimes it was because of plant structure, sometimes it was because of color, sometimes THC, a lot of times, looking for mold resistance and powder mold mildew resistance and that kind of thing, as well as bug resistance. So it kind of a lot goes into that kind of thing when it comes to selecting. But at this point in time, that's been one of my favorite things I've been able to be a part of in life here is being able to breed and create new strains of cannabis, or I shouldn't say much new strains, but new profiles and things of cannabis. Like, you know, as like I got started with the Emerald Cup, that first year, my first selection that I chose to put in there was something we called purple candy cane. And we end up calling it storyteller a lot of times now because you would smoke that. And this was right, 2015 was kind of right at the time where a lot of testing was starting to happen. That was the first year they really started making sure everything was tested and for pesticides and everything at the Emerald Cup too. But for me, that strain was really out of the ordinary. It tasted so delicious, it smelled so delicious, and it just lifted you up so fast and made you want to tell stories. And it turns out that that's once you start learning some of these technical things with these terpenes and cannabinoids and the way they can kind of interact with each other, you start realizing things like this. It was the myrcene, the high level of myrcene, which was 1.7% myrcene in that flower. It only had 22% THC, but it would hit you in the head like something as strong as you've ever smoked. And the reason is because that high level of myrcene allows the blood-brain barrier to be penetrated faster with the THC. So it's kind of like, in effect, that THC all goes to the brain really quick and into the system really quick because of that high level of myrcene. And just noticing when you have special things like that you come across. So like the next year, Mean Gene up there in Mendocino is somebody that I have a tremendous amount of respect for that does some amazing breeding projects and produces some incredible flavors. and I know his aunt, and I had seen the pina plant, his pineapple plant growing, and smelling that and looking at the purple candy cane. I was thinking, man, these two together are going to make something amazing. So I bred the pina with the purple candy cane, and then that came up with tropical sleigh ride is what we developed out of that. And tropical sleigh ride was something really unique, though I didn't really know it at the time as much, but I began to learn it pretty quick because 2017 at the Emerald Cup was the first ever lab awards handed out by SC Labs. And it turns out that we won the highest terpene flower with that tropical sleigh ride at 4.8% terps on that. But one of the amazing things was it was ocimene dominant, and ocimene dominant profiles in a plant is extremely rare. It's like 1% of all cannabis is ocimene dominant. And when you have a really high level of ocimene of over like 1% of the flower, now you have something that kind of had never been seen before. And SC Labs gave us a lot of credit as kind of bringing ocimene into the market during those years. And ocimene to me was something that was just, it was so delicious of a smell. It's like a sweet, woodsy, kind of tropical smell. And I just loved that smell. All I had to do was smell that plant, and it would literally get me high just from just my body being so happy from the smell. And so turns out that ocimene is a very cool terpene that is antiviral, antibacterial. Um, and they did a lot of tests during COVID with this. And, you know, you get a cannabinoid like CBG with ocimene. Now you have two things kind of working synergistically with each other that are both antiviral and antibacterial. And so it's cool to see some of the medicines that are now being targeted, being able to be developed out of cannabis when you're specifically going after some of these certain traits, whether they be in the terpenes or the cannabinoids. And then now, you know, science is learning fast too about all these other things that are in the plants with the flavonoids and different things also, and the color stuff, and just such a neat thing to be a part of right now. And there's so much learning happening so fast, and to be able to breed different things and come up with different, you know, kind of flowers that are for different people for different reasons. You know, we got a lot of neat CBD line stuff, which you know, a lot of people these last few years have been becoming very familiar with CBD. But, you know, from my own experience and also from customers' experiences that I've watched, you know, if you can have a dynamic kind of medicine where it's not just CBD, you're adding in some THC and some of the different cannabinoids with it, but particular THC, and you get a 1-to-1 ratio of a CBD THC plant, now you're looking at some really good medicine. You know, the endocannabinoid system has a lot going on inside of our body, and it seems like the more you're feeding it with different cannabinoids and different terpenes and all this stuff, the more you're learning about what these different medicines can do for you. If you, it's good to experiment around with these things for people to some degree, because you might all of a sudden find a medicine that just clicks perfect for whatever type of ailment you're looking to have it help you with.
And that's the thing about cannabis, it's subjective, and that's one thing which we still get from patients all the time. Is, you know, what's the cancer bud? What's the asthma bud? What's the migraine bud? And unfortunately, that's just always been a frustration, is that people have to try things, and they have to try and find things and document till they can really find something that registers with them, as opposed to, you know, just getting high. It's about finding that medicinal value in a specific cultivar, and then trying to find afterwards, then trying to find a similar chemovar type. So if that one's not in stock, you can find that as well. Michael Krawitz has a follow-up question.
Yeah, our internal work, we've been doing some sort of research on various current events and issues around cannabis, and we've come across somewhat of a conundrum with THC. I mean, first of all, pure THC, you can get a FDA approved pure THC pill, and people hate it. For many, many years, we've gotten feedback from those that have tried the pharmacy drug. It's called Marinol. Don't like it. Don't like pure. And in fact, the FDA down scheduled or down regulated Marinol based on its low diversion. Like nobody even wanted it. They couldn't even sell their pills, right? So right now it seems like THC is sort of the marker. Like it's what people go to shop for it based on THC numbers. But our research seems to indicate to us that the future won't be like that, and it won't revolve around THC percentages. So I mean, my question really for you comes down to a very simple question. Um, what do you how do you see that? Do you see THC as a indicator, or do you see THC as a predominant indicator, or sort of a you know a, an associated indicator, like difference between clouds and rain, right? If it's raining, it's going to be cloudy, but if it's cloudy, you don't know it's necessarily going to rain. So is THC like rain, or is it like clouds? You know what I mean?
That's a great question. It's very interesting as these markets emerge and first start opening up, and just seeing how THC orientated they really are. Like it's a recreational part of the market, I guess, that opens up, and everybody wants to get high, and they think that the more THC you have, the higher you're going to get, which not isn't really necessarily the case. The way it all interacts with the different stuff going on in that flower with the terpenes and cannabinoids and things that we don't even know right now that are just being discovered and are going to keep getting discovered. This is a very complex plant that has a lot of secrets to it. But I hope for the benefit of the marketplace, when you go to a dispensary in California right now, it's still, I mean, even years after being open, everybody still seems to be very number orientated and looking at that number. And, I'll be honest with you right now, in this California marketplace, these numbers practically don't even mean anything, because there is no real uniform testing procedure. Like, I'll take flowers and send them to multiple different labs. It's the same exact flower. They come back with all kinds of different numbers on them. There's no consistency to the testing process. So, everybody's been shopping around. If the market wants high THC stuff, they all go to labs that give you results with high THC numbers, when in reality, a lot of times it's not even high THC numbers anyways. But yeah, I think the market's much over fascinated right now. Looking back, like on my own time with cannabis, and back before 2015 and 16, numbers didn't matter. You didn't even know what the numbers were. You were selecting everything just based on effect and feel and all that, smell, taste. Now you have all this breeding getting done, and I'm caught up in it myself, of going after these number things. And it's kind of frustrating because, I do smoke. I have noticed this last year to have developed some really high THC strains that I do love smoking. And I smoked them real hard for some reason for this last month. And then I just started smoking the last couple of days some of the lower THC stuff, which that's generally the stuff that wins in the Emerald Cup to it. Those judges don't know the numbers. They don't know what's going on. They're just going for taste, feel, effects, and all that kind of stuff. And they pick out the best cannabis. It doesn't have to do with lab numbers and stuff. So this whole thing's kind of frustrating to see the market want these numbers so bad. One thing that's been funny for me to watch recently, the last couple of years, as I've been starting to go back and grow a lot of the old school landrace strains just to see what they were about, and kind of start breeding some back up again and stuff. And this, like the Afghan 90, that comes from Quick Seeds, just KWIK seeds. Their Afghan 90 is an amazing strain of old Afghan from 1990 genetics that went over to Amsterdam and have kind of been saved now. And growing those, I mean, I didn't know the numbers when I was first harvesting them last year, but I was loving smoking them. And it turns out we're getting all these numbers that came back. They almost all had CBD ratio stuff, coming out of them. And you hear all these people these days wanting to get smoked like they did back in the old days. And it's kind of funny because That's what a lot of them were smoking back in the old days. They just didn't know it. It was like a lot of times 9% THC, 9% CBD, something like that. And it makes you so relaxed and just feel good. And nowadays, a lot of the pots just kind of like racy and edgy and, too strong, too THC orientated. It's nice to have those combinations and like starting to see some of these other cannabinoids and starting to get attention like THCV. And that's one I have a collaborative breeding project going right now with a partner. And he has a very high THCV plant. And this THCV is very interesting. It's got its place for sure. It has a very fast onset of a high, doesn't last very long, and then settles into a very focused high to where you can really focus while you've just smoked it. So, I mean, it's just neat to see how much diversity cannabis offers out there and how much ailments and stuff it can help people with. I've been seeing some of the statistics. No wonder the pharmaceutical companies and the alcohol companies and stuff never wanted this to really be legal because as soon as this gets legalized in the States, you see their numbers really take a big hit fast because people can start having access to some good, clean, natural medicine and they're finding it out and know it. And yeah, it's impacting those other businesses, but this should have always been. It's amazing to look back at this whole process. This should have never, it was always the people's medicine for themselves. They should have been able to grow it and have it. And to see it been prohibition for so many decades. And then now, as it's moving from prohibition to this commercial process, it's not gotten much better for the patients in some ways. Like, it's incredible to see how many places you're still not allowed to grow it. You have to buy it from these commercial places and stuff. And it's just sad because it's an easy medicine to grow and just connect with without all these rules and regulations and crap.
That's for sure. Next up will be Council Member Freeze.
Thanks. So if you're interested in medicinal cultivars, would you discuss the differences in your selection of genetics from the medicinal market and the adult use market?
Yes. I was just touching on some of it with the CBD THC kind of combination ratio stuff and the really high cannabinoid of different cannabinoids and stuff. That has a lot to do with your medical market. Your recreational market, is very THC orientated. That's where the real high, the bang for the buck, I guess, comes from if you're looking to recreate and get high. But even then, THC has a lot of medical benefits. And, myself, I don't sleep well at night and never kind of have after I worked on the commercial fishing boats and just had a really erratic sleep schedule and stuff from years of that. And so for me, sleeping at night, like I prefer, a really good, strong, high THC uh, flower. But in terms of so many other things, as I'm getting older, one thing I've had to deal with is Lyme's disease, and it has a lot of it hurts you, it hurts the body. And so to find good medicine that can relieve some of that stuff is nice with the inflammation and different things with THCA and then CBDA and even CBD and all kinds of different things. But generally, like when I'm looking for medicinal cannabis, it is a THC CBD combination thing. And, like in my own collection of stuff I've bred and selected and I have a 1-to-3 ratio thing. It's a 6% THC, 18% CBD, and it's real high terpenes at 4%. But that is a very good introduction of a medicine for generally people coming in that are new smokers. Like I'm noticing that's a really sad thing for them is they go into a store right now, a recreation store, and ask the bud tender what's popular, what they're selling, what they recommend. And here comes this big high THC thing for somebody that's never even really sometimes maybe smoked cannabis before, or a tourist from somewhere else that's never really smoked. And here they now have this THC thing that's going to blast them. It's not the first thing they need to smoke, to bring them into this to plant. So a 6% THC, 18% CBD thing, that's a very comfortable smoke, and I've seen a lot of older people that have asked me what they recommend that they try smoking. They've never smoked before, and that's what I recommend, something like that right there. As they're comfortable with that, you can take them up a little higher. I have a 1-to-1 plant, which is 10% THC, 10% CBD. It's the same thing, 3.8% terpenes. You want rich amounts of terpenes. That just always helps the flower be of more value. Um, Usually medicinally, recreationally, everything. Terpenes are great. So you want a good amount of them. A normal plant would have 1.5% total terpenes in the flower. You want to start seeing flower, 2.5%, 3% total terpenes. That's some really nice, good flower now. And, they can go all the way up to 5%. On the terpenes, and now that's a lot of value you're bringing in a flower when you have 5% terpenes in that flower. And then learning about the different things that these terpenes do, the different ways they interact with the cannabinoids. That's all medicine and medicinal learning type things. It's there's so many opportunities to help people with so many different aspects of this plant. It's all being learned right now, though. It's happened rapidly.
Wade Lester has a follow-up.
Yes, thank you, Etienne and Mark. This is a fascinating conversation. First off, a couple of observations. I love that your guide, if you will, that leads you to select this plant over that plant for breeding is really based on your senses, your sense of smell, your vision. How does it look to you? Does it turn you on, to use an old hippie cliche term? But you know what I mean, because I understand that's what has happened to me more than once. I've encountered a plant that it's hard to describe why, but something stands out, and all of them, it turned out, had medicinal value, very much like what you're describing, of plants with medicinal value. And then one last, no, not the last. I never stop at the last. Um, years ago, I was really fascinated with this very thing that we're talking about. Why people were so fascinated with high THC when Marinol was pure THC, but nobody liked that. So there was clearly something else going on. And in conversation with a fellow named DJ Short, who is an acclaimed breeder, and just to be clear, I don't consider myself a breeder. I'm more of a dilettante. I do some breeding, but by no means consider myself a professional. But even the little bit of breeding that I've done, my senses guided me as well. Anyway, back to G.A. Short. We talked about why the cannabis that was available. This was back in the early twos, and why the cannabis that was available in California was different than the cannabis that he remembered smoking when he was at the American University in Mexico, and that I remembered smoking when I was living in South Florida. And it was his opinion that it was because the cannabis that was available to both of us at that time was exactly what you're pointing to, Mark. It had THC and CBD and likely other cannabinoids. And anyway, I looked at like DEA, or the organization that became DEA. You can look at their data, and yeah, they ran tests on things they called Panama Red or Colombian Gold and whatnot, and virtually every one of them had CBD and THC, usually more THC than CBD, but both were present. And I think that's really, it's to do, ideally, the consumer would come to understand if they're smoking cannabis because they want to enjoy it, or for ceremonial purposes, or for pain, or whatever reason. I think people should be able to have access to it. But as veterans, I really got to say, we want to help our brothers and sisters who have suffered the trauma of military service, whether or not you were actually injured by your service. Uh, we all know that there's life-changing things happen when you go through the military system. Slow down, Wade. Anyway, I just want to, yeah, what I'm really pointing to is don't let the numbers on your packaging guide you to the thing that's going to give you what you're seeking. Talk to your friends. If you have the opportunity to smell something available, I know in California you can't, but you know, use your senses to identify what's going to work for you is a really good guide. And the last piece, and then I will stop. Grow your own. I really, I think there's something you alluded earlier, Mark, to magic, and that's a much misused term, but there is something magical about seeds, in my opinion. And one of the things that I think is magical about cannabis seeds is if a person takes a little bit of time with that seed or seeds before they plant them, they'll likely get something that actually not only flourishes in their spot, but is particularly specifically good for them. Now, how that happens, I don't know, but I've seen it again and again. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on a novice person's opportunity to use their senses through either smelling flower and then trying to find seeds of that or a cut of that, or how would a novice use their senses to find the cannabis plant that's going to work for them, Mark? Boy, that was a
Good.
long-winded way of asking a question. Sorry, brother. Go
Well,
for it.
I love hearing everything you have to say, Wade. I got a ton of respect for you, and just thanks for sharing there. That's one of the things when you're selecting, like I'm selecting from my own perspective and where I come from with what I like with smells or maybe certain traits that are sometimes even in the background that I'm not aware of, but I'm selecting it for that. And everybody has different, they come from different places and everything, the way their bodies work, mind works different than mine. So when they get up close and personal, it's really fun when I have people down to the garden because I have my favorite plants at the end of the year that I have picked out. But it's really cool to watch other people come through and pick out their own favorite things that are a lot of times ones I wouldn't have picked, especially when it comes to like the pheno hunt garden in the nursery. But everybody, there's a lot of, nobody's right or wrong. It's just what they like and it's your intuition. So when you're going through these plants, they may not literally be talking to you, but they're trying to. They're talking to you in certain ways. And as you're smelling them, looking at them, there's some communication level that's happening there. And for myself, it's kind of a funny thing. When I'm going through a garden and I'm smelling plants, some of the best ones I've ever selected in my life that have gone on to be big winning plants have come from this technique. And it's just smelling the plant, and sometimes you'll get that thing that comes right up your spine. You can feel the tingle just go right up your spine into your head. When I have that happen in a strong way, that connects me to that plant and just lets me know something's talking to me here. And if that keeps happening through the course of a little bit of time as I'm visiting the plants and you keep going to that one that is sending a chakra up your spine, there's something going on right there with that. And so that's kind of just one of my own personal techniques that I use when I'm selecting plants. But it's to a person, whatever's enticing to you. If you want to, like, all of a sudden you're smelling something and it just makes you literally want to smoke it because it smells so good, and there's something telling you, man, I need to smoke that. That's another one of those signs. It's just calling to you for that plant. So on a personal level, for people, hopefully somewhere down in the future, when you're talking about you're not allowed to smell the plants at the retail, yeah, that's a bummer. Like, you're trying to buy a good medicine for yourself and you can't even smell the plants and you have to go on this number thing and stuff. It'll be really cool. Somewhere down the line, like, I'm just kind of brainstorming even right now at the moment of like down at the nursery and having people come through at some point in time, kind of like more like a winery, and allowing them to come through the gardens and be able to visit the plants, and then they can choose their medicine a lot more informed that way rather than just buying it sight in a jar with numbers on it.
I love that vision. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Wade. And next up will be Council Member Davis. with our next question.
Yeah, given your production style, what does the future for living soil look like, and how does someone scale for large production growth?
Yeah, I think living soil is really the future of where this is at. You're seeing it develop rapidly. The consumers notice that the flower is a more clean, tasty flower coming out of, just like normal grow would be smart pots, just in an outdoor grow, sitting on top of all that wonderful soil, contained in a container with a bunch of generic kind of filled ingredients. And it's just kind of funny to see that as things are developing, this living soil is becoming known. And you have the Origins Council in California, you have this terroir thing that's about to really develop here and be able to share with people the different regions and the way it was grown in the ground. You're not allowed to grow in smart pots and generic soil to be a part of the terroir program. And like it's really a neat thing to see, even indoors right now. Like I am my palate is for clean, tasty, organic medicine. Like the market down in Los Angeles, there's these giant salt-fed hydroponic grows under the lights down there indoors, and it's a totally different tasting product. Like I'll give them this type of product sometimes, and it takes them a little while for them to get used to it. They think it tastes wrong to start with because they got this salty product that they're so used to smoking that anything that tastes different doesn't taste right. To me, what they smoke doesn't taste right, but it's really neat to see some of these farms converting, and even some of the large indoor farms here in California converting over to living soil. I know there's a couple of them down there in Los Angeles. There's one really highly awarded one up here in Mendocino that's kind of a smaller one, but just to see them now converting over into the living soil techniques indoors is a really cool thing to see happening. And just seeing that product now becoming much more clean, just tastes better. It's better for you, I think. It doesn't have all the salts and chemical kind of stuff in it. And living soil to me is the future. It's hopefully you start to see large agriculture. You're seeing it to some degree, but really start to see large agriculture starting to see the benefits of having good, healthy living soil. Unfortunately, a lot of this soil that's out in our Central Valley here in California, which at one time was the most pristine, perfect, highly mineralized uh, ground really in the world. And in the last 100 years through farming practices, it's been really ruined to a lot of degree. And just the costs that have to go into trying to keep a soil growing that doesn't want to grow anymore and everything, and to produce when it's been kind of ruined is it's going to take some time. But nature has a way of plants and everything. You see that little one spade of grass growing out of a sidewalk crack, and if nobody ever does anything, the next thing you know, it takes over the sidewalk. It's just what nature kind of does. It's resilient. But we've really put it down a lot with different farming practices that are happening. And that's another thing, just talking about the living soil. That's, I think, a really critical component for people to be able to grow their own medicine, even if it's an indoor thing and you're just growing in a little tiny grow tent. Start to think about, watch some videos and start to think about doing some living soil. And it's just really a fun thing to learn about and be a part of, and you grow better medicine with it also. And then just nature in general. Like I'm a big proponent of encouraging people to grow with nature. Like none of my techniques or anything that is really, unique. I don't put a ton of things into it. I just really understand what the plant needs and the way nature corresponds with it. And I do my best to just bring those two things together and let them do what they do. I stay out of the whole process as much as I can. I've seen a lot of people screw up their plants and medicine by just trying to do too much with it rather than just letting it be and letting it enjoy its time while it's alive too. You don't need to be in there tying it around all over the place, defoliating leaves, all this different stuff that people will do. A lot of times it's just because they love their plant, they want to be with it. But a good technique and principle is just to let nature support it the way you need to, but let nature really do what it does. It's the one that really does the growing and everything. And that's where I encourage, sun growing at like, we're finding out that this cannabis plant's a hardy thing. It can grow all over the country. It may not come out quite the same as it does here in California, but it's still good medicine. And if you're in those northern climate areas and it's just you got a harsh, fast winter set on, these auto flowers that are being developed these days are super hardy, and there's some really good genetics going into these auto flowers. If people want to look into some autoflowers, I tell them I experiment, I grow all kinds of them, but Purple City Genetics here in Oakland has some really great genetics. If they're looking for some autoflower seeds they want to get, I'd look at it from those guys. Their stuff is super consistent, super hardy. I mean, if you're planting up there, if you're in Minnesota and you think you can't grow your own medicine outside, you kind of can. These auto flowers are built for tough climates. You plant them 1st of June. It's done end of August, and you got nice stuff. I mean, there's nice cannabinoid numbers in them now. There's high THC stuff. Regardless of where you're really at in North America here, I feel that you can grow outdoor in the sun. Just a matter of dialing in your right genetics, which might be autoflowers for some people up in the northern climates.
All right. Um, Wade, do you have a follow-up?
No, it occurs to me that if we're getting close to the end of the recording, I wanted to make sure that Mark let everybody know how they can see his website or whatever sort of online presence he wants to call out to help him with his products in the market. That's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, this is your time to promote yourself, your website, any social medias. How do people find you and get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
I appreciate that. That's something I'm not real on top of a lot of that kind of stuff. We got our little Instagram thing. I got it's at Greenshock Farms there on our Instagram handle, and then I got the website greenshockfarms.com. But if you type us in to the Google thing, there's a lot of stuff I noticed that comes up from other people. Got a lot of magazine articles that have been written out there and different things. But it's funny. It's such an important thing to run a successful business, doing all that stuff. But these last couple of years, I've been so unfocused on a lot of that stuff. I'm really just a lot of hands-on stuff with the work, with the plants and stuff. Um, we will be here. If people are looking for genetics, we'll be at the Terpenomy seed event here coming early in San Francisco this year with David Downs and Leaf Lee. Um, I have noticed that in terms of some, I've had, unfortunately, we have some counterfeited products that are out there with some different handles and people selling seeds that aren't coming from us and stuff at times, which has been kind of a bummer to see. I'm trying to open up, hopefully to be around the first of the year, a place where people can come and get genetics from us on a secure website where they know it comes from us and it's not from something else. But and then I just, talking to you guys, one thing I would love to do is maybe be able to donate some seed packs out there to you guys to give out to some of the members. I would, give out really the THC CBD stuff or something like that. But if you guys have a way of getting some stuff to your members, I would love to be able to help if I can do that.
Well, I have a dispensary in Berkeley, Berkeley Patients Group. So if you ever come down and just drop off a donation down there, I'll be more than happy to take it and spread it to the other members, as well as we work with Compassionate Veterans who also as a veterans group who gives away free cannabis. So we're also happy to donate seed stock directly to them. So it goes all directly to veterans.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we follow up and I can get that done for you. I'd love to do that. My own personal connection, I'm not a vet. I haven't ever served in the service, but so many of my friends that I have had in life have. And, that's why farming and cannabis, I'm really wanting to talk to the members about, because I've seen a lot of the problems that come from some of the service and stuff out there. I just had a really close friend of mine who was an Army Green Beret in Vietnam for 699 days straight, ended up taking his life. And he was such a good father figure to me and such a great guy. Just to see the pain and the things people have to suffer, it really hurts. And that's why I'm just honored to be here with you guys and do anything I can to help the vets out there to heal and recover from what they've had to be gone through.
We thank you and we appreciate that. Councilmember Laughter, do you have something else before we close out? No? All right. Well, a very fascinating deep dive. I cannot thank you enough for your expertise and continue to do that voodoo that you do so well. And we look forward to seeing you again next year at the State Fairs competition. And hopefully there'll be an Emerald Cup next year. But with that in mind, I cannot thank you enough, Mr. Greyshock. Mark Greyshock has joined us today for our V.A.C. Roundtable number 81. I'd like to thank our members, Michael Crowitz, Leslie Fries, Wade Laughter, Mike Davis, and myself, Etienne Fontan. Thank you for joining us for our Veterans Action Council Roundtable number 81. Y'all have a great rest of your day and weekend, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.